For years, a war has raged between the humanoid species blessed by the god of light and the demons of the god of darkness, and after a long and deadly battle, a group of heroes have finally made it to the demon lord's castle to put a stop to this. However, along the way, there were several casualties, and right outside the throne room, the team is attacked by a demon baddie. Theron tells Kyle and Urza to go on without him while he handles the demon on his own. So they continue moving, but they both know Theron isn't making it out of that alive. They make their way into the throne room, but all of a sudden, Kyle is attacked by several spheres of dark matter from above. He is able to block a few of them, but he can't handle this many, so the mage, Urza, jumps in front of him to block the shot, but in the process, she is completely disintegrated. After Urza's death, the Demon Lord finally shows himself because he is ready to battle Kyle to the death, and the hero is so enraged that he charges in head first without thinking. The Demon Lord launches more dark matter blasts at Kyle, and luckily he manages to duck behind a pillar to avoid getting hit, but after seeing what the attack did, he is starting to get worried. The attack the Demon Lord used is called Elimination, an unblockable high-level spell that destroys everything it comes into contact with. As long as the Demon Lord possesses magic like that, Kyle will never be able to get close enough to land a significant blow, so he has no choice but to do something risky. He believes he should be able to take the Demon Lord out if he releases all the energy in the magic gem of his sword, but doing so is so dangerous that he likely won't survive. He is well aware of the risks, but he has no choice, so he releases the full power of the sword and charges forward to break through the Demon Lord's defenses. With the extra boost in power, Kyle is able to stab clean through the Demon Lord's body and completely destroy him. But in the process, Kyle's sword is completely destroyed and he is severely injured. He managed to save the world, but in the process, he lost everyone he swore to protect in the first place. His friends, his family, and even his home were all destroyed by the demons, so he doesn't feel like he won at all. A few moments later, Kyle collapses from his wounds, and he is okay with his impending death because he has nothing left to live for. But suddenly, the Demon Lord's magic gem returns, and the power inside it is beginning to overload. With the Demon Lord gone, there is no one to control its power. And if that thing goes out of control, then it could destroy the entire world. Kyle crawls his way over to the gem in an attempt to stop it from exploding, and as soon as he grabs hold of it, he gets caught up in a flash of bright light. The next time he opens his eyes, Kyle finds himself in his childhood bed, and he is extremely confused because this shouldn't be possible. He gets out of bed and walks over to the window thinking this must be a dream, but sure enough, when he looks outside, he sees his hometown in all its glory. The same hometown he once watched burn to the ground after a demon attack. The sight brings a tear to his eye, but after everything he has been through, he still can't accept that this is reality. Just then, his childhood friend, Lise, comes into the room looking for Kyle, and as soon as he sees her, he freezes up. Lise notices that Kyle is acting strange, so she asks him if everything is alright, but he doesn't say a word. He still believes all this is just a hallucination. But at this point, he doesn't care, he's just happy to see Lise again. So he hugs her as tight as he can. Lise gets flustered and asks Kyle what he's doing, but Kyle is too stuck in the moment to respond. She tries to pull away from him, but Kyle doesn't let her go, so they both lose balance and end up falling onto the bed. Now that Kyle is on top of her, the tension is palpable, and he is ready to go all the way. But at this point in time, Kyle and Lise don't have that kind of relationship yet, and after everything he has done, her embarrassment has officially turned to anger, so she pushes him away and punches him so hard that he flips through the air 3 times. Kyle is now writhing in pain on the bed, and Lise yells at him for trying to pull something like that with no warning. She doesn't know what's wrong with him today, and she normally wouldn't be so angry because she likes him too, but she'd appreciate a little heads up next time, so she can be emotionally prepared. Lise then storms out of the room, leaving Kyle to think about what he has done. But while Kyle is thinking, he realizes that he actually felt Lise's punch, and it hurt a lot. If this were really a dream, then he shouldn't be able to feel pain at all, so there's a possibility that this is the real world. Kyle then gets up to lift the sheets off, and to his surprise, he sees the Demon Lord's magic gem lying there, so he now knows for certain that this is the real world. He walks over to the mirror to take a proper look at himself, and he realizes he looks a lot younger than he did before. On top of that, he clearly remembers suffering several fatal injuries after the battle with the Demon Lord, yet now his body is perfectly healthy. Furthermore, his hometown is back to normal, and Lise is alive, so he comes to the conclusion that he must have returned to the past somehow, and the only clue he has in regards to the cause is this magic gem. He knows the Demon Lord's magic power was immense, but even then, a spell that allows you to return to the past should be impossible to create. Just then, Kyle's stomach growls because he hasn't eaten yet, so he heads downstairs to get some food. When he walks into the kitchen, he is surprised to find a full meal laid out for him, and he realizes that Lise must have made it for him before she left. He remembers how Lise would often come over to cook for him since he and his mom never had the time, and he is very grateful for her help. He sits down and pulls out a bowl to taste the food, and he absolutely loves it. It has been years since he has gotten to eat proper food since on the battlefield. He had to survive off calorie rations in the middle of nowhere. A few minutes later, Theron comes downstairs because he's hungry too, but once he sees all the empty plates in front of Kyle, he realizes he was too late. Kyle even finished the entire pot of stew too, and while Theron is complaining about all the food being gone, Kyle thinks about how absurd this whole thing is. Up until a moment ago, the two of them were fighting alongside one another against the Demon Lord, but he ended up sacrificing himself so Kyle could finish their mission. Theron notices Kyle staring at him, so he turns around and asks him if something is wrong. Kyle snaps out of it and says he's alright, but he still doesn't know how far into the past this is, so he asks Theron what year this is. Theron is a little confused since that's an odd question to ask, but he tells Kyle that today is the 24th of May in the year 2823. Kyle can't believe what he just heard, so he asks Theron if he's sure that's today's date, and Theron tells him he is serious. Today happens to be Kyle's birthday, so Theron says he will forgive him for finishing all the food, but he is still starving, so he plans to go get something to eat from Lise. Although, he's probably going to have to get down on his knees and beg before she'll agree to feed him. Something like this is pretty normal for Theron since there's no such thing as pride when it comes to food for him. But while he's doing that, Kyle stays in the kitchen because he has to put some serious thought into his next move. If he really has returned to the past, then he's going to need to talk to his mom about this. He heads out to the shed and goes down into the library to find his mom, and when he finally spots her, he's happy to see her again, but he can't get the image of her brutal death in the future out of his mind. His mom is surprised to see him because Kyle never comes down into the library at night, but he points out that it's already morning, so she must have spent the entire night reading without realizing it. She apologizes for spending so much time down here, but that's not why Kyle came. He tells her he actually has a question about magic theory, and as one of the few archmages in the country, he figured she'd be the best person to ask. His mom says she'll gladly listen to his question, so Kyle asks her if there are any spells in the world that can send a person back in time. Kyle's mom answers, saying spells like that do exist, and he is surprised because he has never heard of a time spell before. His mother goes on to explain that not much is known about time magic, and while they know it exists, no one would be able to use it. The reason the spell can't be used is because it requires an unfathomable amount of magic power, so there isn't a mage in the world who could possibly pull it off. And even if the greatest mage in all of history were to attempt the spell with every ounce of magic in their body, they would barely be able to travel a single second back in time. Kyle asks if it would theoretically be possible to travel years back in time with the help of a magic item, and now that his mom thinks about it, using a magic item to store power would make time travel possible. But it would take over 1,000 years to store that much energy, so she doesn't think it would work. Kyle asks her if it'd be possible for someone to use the Forbidden Right, but his mother is more concerned about how he knows of that spell in the first place. Kyle makes up an excuse and says he just read about it in a book and he'd never even dream of attempting it. His mom is relieved to hear that, but the reason she was so worried is because the Forbidden Right is a spell that allows one to sacrifice life force in exchange for magical power, so it's very dangerous. But even if someone were crazy enough to use it, she still doesn't think it would be possible to use time travel magic effectively. You would need to sacrifice the lives of half of all the humanoids on the continent to pull something like that off, and as far as she knows, there's no one capable of such an atrocity. Besides, there's no catalyst in existence that's capable of storing that much magic power in the first place. But if an artifact like that does exist, then it'd probably be recorded in this book. Kyle's mom flips through the pages of the book, and once she finds what she's looking for, she shows it to Kyle. It's a section about the legendary divine dragon's heart. It is said that the ancient kingdom of Sarles was able to prosper for thousands of years thanks to the power stored inside the gem, but eventually the gem's power was depleted, leading the kingdom to ruin. Kyle's mom believes an artifact as powerful as the dragon heart would be able to store enough power to make time travel possible, but it's been missing for over 1,000 years, so it's possible that it has fallen into the hands of the demons by now. Kyle is starting to piece together what happened, as it's evident that the gem he got from the demon lord must have been the dragon's heart. Kyle's mom thinks it's nice that the two of them are spending time together again because she was worried he has been avoiding her. Kyle apologizes and says he wasn't doing it on purpose, but his mom isn't really mad about it. She's just happy that he came to see her today, and for some reason, she gets the feeling that Kyle is acting a little more mature than usual. Anyway, she remembers Lise saying she'd come over to cook for them today, so she asks Kyle if he wants to go upstairs to eat. But before she leaves, Kyle tells her he actually already ate all the food, and with that single sentence, all the motherly love she felt towards him vanishes for a split second. A moment later, she regains her composure and tells him it's alright since today is his birthday, but she's not going to get him a gift anymore. Talking to his mom was really helpful because Kyle got a lot of useful information from her. Like the fact that this thing is the Divine Dragon's heart and that the Demon Lord most likely pre-programmed the spell into it to send himself back in time. But Kyle still doesn't understand what the Demon Lord would want to go back in time for. Just then, Lise walks up to Kyle, and as soon as he notices her, he begins apologizing for what he did this morning. He tells her he only did it because of a bad nightmare he had, so Lise asks what kind of dream it was. Kyle admits that part of the dream involved her dying, and she now understands why he suddenly hugged her like that. Lise smiles and says she's willing to forgive him since it wasn't his fault, but seeing her smile like that only reminds Kyle of everything he's going to lose in the future. Their village is the closest to the demon territory, so once the invasion begins, they will be the first to suffer the demon's attack. The village ended up being burnt to the ground, and Lise was killed in the chaos of it all. So from that moment on, Kyle swore that he would avenge her. But now she's sitting right in front of him, as alive as ever. Lise asks Kyle if something is wrong since he suddenly got all quiet, but he is deep in thought because if he doesn't do something soon, then 3 years from now, he is going to lose everyone he loves again. He refuses to let things end the same way, so no matter what it takes, he swears to himself that he will change the future and save everyone from their cruel fate. Kyle needs to be ready for the day of the Great Cataclysm 3 years from now, so the next day he begins his training and creates a mental image of the Demon Lord to fight against. He charges forward at the mental image, but after countering a few attacks, he realizes his body is weak as hell compared to how it was before. Although it's kind of expected since by this point in time, Kyle had been living like a certified bum for years, so his compatibility absolutely sucks. However, he seems to have retained his increased magic stats from the future, so he tries to make up for the lack of strength by casting speed and strength enhancement on his body. But unfortunately, that doesn't do much to fix his uncoordinated body, so he still fails instantly. Kyle realizes that he needs to put in a lot of work to make his body strong enough to handle his magic power, so he is determined to continue his training. Meanwhile, Lise and Theron have been spying on him from the bushes, and from their perspective, Kyle has just been yelling and falling over by himself all morning, so they are starting to get seriously worried. Just then, Theron's mom, Layla, shows up, and she wants to know what the two of them are up to. They both explain that Kyle has been working really hard lately, which is weird since a few days ago, he couldn't care less about his training. Layla has no idea what caused such a drastic change in Kyle, but if she had to guess, she thinks he might be doing it for a girl he likes. Hearing that crushes Lisa's hopes since Kyle hasn't confessed to her or anything, so she assumes he must have fallen in love with someone else and proceeds to shake him out of anger, causing him to throw up. Lise realizes she took things too far, so to make up for shaking the vomit out of Kyle, she prepares his favorite meal for lunch. Kyle is still upset about being shaken like that for no reason, but he's willing to let it go since she apologized. Anyway, since everyone is here, Kyle tells them he has a question he'd like to ask. He wants to know the best way to force multiple nations to take action, and everyone is a bit confused since it's an odd question to ask at dinner, but his mom puts some thought into it, and there are a few ways he can force nations into action. One would be to get the kings on his side, or to become an influential figure like a priest or a hero, but if all else fails, he could always grow a mustache and commit war crimes to get the nation's attention. Kyle thanks his mom for the advice, but he needs to rally the nation's leaders within the next 2 years, and of all the options she has given, the only thing he can feasibly accomplish before then is to become a great hero. Kyle heads to his room and immediately starts reading every book available to plan out his path, and knowing what's coming in the future is really helpful here since he can confirm which legends are true. Just then, Theron comes in to see him, and he's amazed to see Kyle so focused on reading. He sits on the bed and asks if Kyle is really serious about becoming a hero since it's not exactly a job title that you can just apply for, but Kyle is already aware of that. Normally, someone would become a hero by slaying a demon king or something along those lines, but Kyle can't do that yet, so he needs to make preparations. It's a given that all heroes need to have incredible strength, but strength alone won't be enough to get the job done. To put it bluntly, Kyle says he needs to get a lot of money. That doesn't sound like a very heroic goal to Theron, but Kyle is completely serious. As a hero, he can't go around accepting rewards for his heroic deeds, but equipment and traveling costs are pretty expensive, so he's going to need a decent bit of money saved up if he's going to pull this off. Aside from that, he also plans to gain favor with as many influential people as possible to raise his notoriety, but this is starting to sound like Kyle is trying to become a politician instead of a hero. Aside from money and connections, Kyle also says he's going to need a lot of luck, because heroes need to show up at the right place and time when things go wrong. Theron is starting to get worried that Kyle might really be taking the mustache route, but Kyle assures him that he doesn't plan to create any problems just so he can save the day. But he won't deny that he plans to use underhanded tactics to achieve his goals. Theron really doesn't think a hero should be saying stuff like that, but while they're both here anyway, he asks Kyle why he wants to become a hero. He can tell that being a hero is more like a stepping stone towards an end goal for Kyle, so he wants to know what that end goal is. Kyle admits that he does have his reasons for wanting to be a hero, but he can't share that information right now, so Theron is just going to have to trust him on this. The next morning, Kyle talks to Layla and informs her that he will be going out on an adventure soon, and Layla thinks it's a good idea since it's important to go out and learn about the world. She asks Kyle if he has told his mom yet, and Kyle has already talked to her about it this morning, although he hasn't gotten a chance to talk to Lise yet. Since Kyle will be gone for a while, Layla tells him to take Theron with him. Kyle already intended to have Theron come along, so he thanks Layla for permitting him. But this is the first time Theron is hearing of any of this. After that, Kyle goes to talk to Lise and tells her he will be leaving in 2 days. She seems upset that he will be leaving, but she doesn't want to stop Kyle from reaching his goal, so she asks him where he is going. Kyle tells her that his first stop will be the royal capital Malad, and once he gets what he needs from there, the real work begins. Lise suddenly says she has a favor to ask, but Kyle already knows what she's going to say, so he tells her he can't let her come with him. She asks him why she can't come even though Theron is going with him. She has been training hard with the Oracle Warriors, so she assures him that she won't be a liability. Kyle says he just wants to be sure that she's in a safe place, and Lise is about to argue, but before she can say another word, Kyle kisses her and says that when he returns, she will be the first person he visits, so he just needs her to have some faith in him. Lise was so flustered by the kiss that she can't argue anymore, so instead she tells Kyle that as long as he promises he won't do anything reckless out there, she is willing to wait for him. The next day, Kyle needs to go shopping for supplies for his trip, so he asks Lise to come with him, but while they are both in town, Lise spots an elf over by one of the stalls. Lise is intrigued because it's unusual to see an elf in this part of the country, but Kyle is even more intrigued because this isn't just any elf, it's Urza. Kyle recalls all the time he spent with Urza in the future and how she loved him so much that she told him her true name, which is a really big deal among elves. He is so stunned by the sight of her that he accidentally blurts out her name, Exis, but he probably shouldn't have done that since in this time, Urza has no idea who he is, so the fact that a random human knows her true name puts her on edge, and she's about to draw her sword on Kyle. Kyle doesn't want Urza to make a scene, so he grabs her arm and tries to get her to calm down, but nothing is working, so he's forced to use her true name to put her to sleep. Urza then falls into Kyle's arms, and that takes care of one problem, but now Kyle has to deal with Lise, who saw the whole thing. Kyle says he has a perfectly good explanation for this, but I mean, from Lise's perspective, he just walked up to a pretty elf girl, put her asleep in the middle of the street, and is now probably going to kidnap her, so he can't really talk his way out of this. After taking Urza back to his house, he tries convincing her that she imagined him saying her true name, but she isn't dumb enough to fall for that. She knows she heard him say it, but the only people who are supposed to know her true name are her parents, so she demands to know where Kyle learned it. Kyle can't exactly explain that 4 years from now, he and Urza become lovers, and she eventually tells him her true name, and even if he did, there's no way she would believe him. Urza threatens to kill Kyle to make sure he doesn't tell anyone her true name, but Kyle asks her to please wait because he will explain everything to her eventually. Urza can't believe Kyle is asking her to trust him with something as important as her true name, so Kyle offers an alternative. He says he is willing to perform an application of the contract with Urza to prevent him from using her true name for evil. Contracts like these are usually formed between humans and spirits, but in special cases, they can be used to bind two people together. The terms of this contract will be that Kyle isn't allowed to reveal Urza's true name to anyone or use it for evil purposes, and if he breaks the terms at any point, then he will immediately die a painful death. Urza is surprised that Kyle is willing to stake his life on this, so she decides to trust him for now, but she currently isn't able to form the contract since she would need a full moon for that, and the next full moon is in 3 weeks, so she says she'll have to stay in town to keep an eye on Kyle until then. However, Kyle tells her that he's actually leaving town tomorrow, so Urza is forced to join him on his journey since she can't risk letting him out of her sight. The next day, everyone has packed their stuff, and they are about to set out, so Kyle says goodbye to his mom. Lise is also going to be joining Kyle now because she doesn't trust him enough to let him travel alone with Urza after how weird he started acting when he first saw her. The group eventually begins their journey, and Theron almost immediately starts flirting with Urza since he wasn't expecting such a pretty girl to randomly join their party. However, Urza insists that she isn't a part of their party, she's just coming along because she has to stay near Kyle until they've formed their contract. But no one is actually listening to her. Anyway, with Urza and their party, Kyle says they don't need to head to the royal capital right away anymore. Instead, they are headed for the Sumgard Mountains to find the Magic Queen's labyrinth. Theron doesn't think it's worth going since they've all heard the legends and that labyrinth is so large that they'll never be able to find the treasure in there. Kyle assures them that they don't have to worry about that because he has prepared a detailed map to lead them through the labyrinth. Kyle made the map using the memories of his adventure through the labyrinth in the future. But since the labyrinth is still uncharted territory at this point in time, the others find it hard to believe that Kyle managed to get his hands on a genuine map, so they think he got scammed. Urza feels kind of bad for Kyle, so she makes up something about the paper being 1,000 years old magic tree paper to make it sound more genuine. Kyle most definitely got that paper from some random book in the library, so he knows Urza is just BSing, but the others don't know that, and they trust Urza's word a lot more than Kyle's, so they immediately believe that the map is real. But even with the map, the labyrinth is still so big that it will take them ages to get to the treasure. However, Kyle has already thought of a solution for that as well, so he tells everyone they are going to dig a tunnel. They begin preparations on the tunnel right away, and with this, they should be able to avoid all the deadly saw traps laid out across the labyrinth. They've even got Urza helping out with an earth spirit to reinforce the tunnel, so it doesn't collapse, and she seems really motivated for some reason, so she urges Kyle and Theron to work even harder. After a long day of digging, everyone heads back to camp where Lise has prepared a delicious meal for them. Everyone loves the food, so Lise tells them they can have as much as they like. After all, she had a lot of ingredients to work with. Urza asks Lise if she was the one who caught the bear because she didn't think Lise was proficient with weapons. But Lise never said she used a weapon, she just beat the bear to death with her bare hands, something that's completely normal for her. After dinner, Urza uses some of her spirit magic to create an artificial hot spring in the middle of the mountain, so she and Lise take a soak in it, and while they're in there, Kyle has to do everything within his power to stop Theron's degenerate butt from jumping over the wall to peep. The next day, everyone gets back to working on the tunnel, but while the others are on their break, Urza approaches Kyle and demands to know why he wants to become a hero so badly. She knows the others haven't been prying for answers from him because they trust his judgment, but Urza doesn't trust him at all. She wants to know what's driving him to work so hard because no ordinary person would go so far just to become a hero. This entire time while working on the tunnel, Kyle has been wearing rings that make his body 9 times as heavy as usual, yet he hasn't once stopped or complained. She asks if his reasons for doing all this have anything to do with how he knows her true name, but before Urza could get a response, Kyle's shovel strikes the wall of the treasure vault, so he cuts Urza off and asks her to go get the others. Once everyone has arrived, Kyle kicks down the wall and they are greeted by a massive pile of treasure. Theron is overjoyed because with this amount of money, he's never going to have to work again. But while he is busy swimming through the gold coins, Kyle sneaks off on his own because there's a secret treasure hidden in this labyrinth that he needs to find. He makes his way over to one of the back rooms, and there he finds the legendary sword that accompanied him in so many battles in the future, and as he approaches the blade, the sword's avatar appears. Sylvie begins her speech congratulating the brave challenger who overcame the trials of the labyrinth, but Kyle suddenly covers her mouth to shut her up because he doesn't want his friends to find out about her yet. Sylvie gets mad and yells at him for daring to treat her with such disrespect, but this has nothing to do with disrespect, he just really needs her to be quiet for a second. Once Sylvie has calmed down, Kyle tells her he knows that she is a copy of the Queen of Sildoniaxarls, and he didn't actually go through all the traps she set in the labyrinth, he just dug a shortcut to get in quickly. Sylvie can't believe Kyle was able to cheat her labyrinth so easily, and Kyle would love to explain how he knew how to get here, but it would be quicker to just go through the final trial so she can see for herself. The final trial in question involves Kyle pulling out the sword so Sylvie can read his memories, and when she does, she gets a full recap of all the tragedies that are going to happen in the future, all the way up to the point where Kyle touches the dragon's heart and is transported back in time. She has a hard time believing that what she just saw was true because she had no idea time magic could be used on such a scale. But if all that was in Kyle's memories, then it has to be true. Just then, the others realize Kyle is missing, so they go looking for him, but Kyle hasn't informed them about any of this stuff yet, so he asks Sylvie to just play along and act like. He grabs the sword, and as his friends approach, he excitedly yells that he found an intelligent sword. A little while later, Sylvie has been introduced to everyone, and she's currently enjoying herself with some of Lisa's cookies, as it's been centuries since she got to eat any actual food. Lisa asks Sylvie if she's really the Magic Queen, but to be more exact, Sylvie is only part of the Magic Queen. She's a magic life form created to evaluate the people who would eventually find this treasure vault, and if she had deemed them unworthy, then she would have had to blow up this entire place. But she thinks Kyle is interesting, so he has her approval for now. She also tells them to bring that bag along since it is connected directly to the treasure vault. Since Kyle has gotten the treasure he needed, he and the others head over to the royal capital. And while they are there, Sylvie keeps trying to run off to go try out all the food stalls, but Theron doesn't want her getting lost. The reason they came here is that they need to get some new equipment, and Kyle knows the perfect place for it. He leads everyone to a weapons store in the middle of town, and this place is pretty exclusive, so when they walk in, the receptionist asks them if they have a recommendation letter or something because kids like them could never afford to buy this stuff here. Kyle recalls that this store requires a membership fee to get service, but with how much treasure they have now, the membership fee isn't something he needs to worry about. He hands the receptionist some gold coins from the treasure vault, and the receptionist can hardly believe what Kyle just gave him, but he did pay the fee, so he tells Kyle and the others they can head in now. Once they are inside, they are introduced to the owner of the shop, Fespa, and he offers to help them pick out the gear they need. Sylvie notices a few swords on the wall, and she recognizes them as some of Melanis's work. Fespa is surprised that she can tell that from just a glance, but she's right. These swords were made by the great craftsman, Melanis, from ancient times. However, Sylvie has actually met Melanis before, and his work wasn't the best, but he threw a tantrum every time she criticized him. Fespa is confused by what Sylvie just said, but before she can say anything else, Kyle steps in and drags her away because they can't let anyone find out that she's the Queen of Magic. Anyway, Fespa begins showing everyone around the shop, and for Kyle, he suggests this set of dragon-scale armor, handcrafted by dozens of underpaid workers and loaded to the gills with resistance magic. Kyle really likes the practicality of the armor, so he decides to buy it, and Fespa is shocked that he made the decision so quickly because this thing is really expensive. Kyle asks Theron if he'd like to get a set of dragon armor as well, but Theron doesn't want to wear a matching suit with Kyle, so he says he will get something else. Kyle is fine with that, and since everyone is here already, Kyle tells them they can grab anything they think they'll need. The others grab things like spirit bracelets, gauntlets for Lise, and arm gear for Theron to boost his power, but it does absolutely nothing for his charisma. Now that they've gotten all the equipment they'll need, Kyle asks Fespa if he has any magic stones in stock, so Fespa shows him one of his most popular items. It's a magic stone enchanted with explosion magic, so it is very useful in offensive combat. Explosion stones are great, but Kyle was actually hoping for something that would be effective against reptile-type monsters, so Fespa shows him a magic stone enchanted with a cold spell. Lizards are weak to the cold, so this should be fairly effective against them. However, it is difficult to enchant a magic stone with a cold spell, so these are rather expensive. Kyle doesn't even bother asking what the price is, he just says he wants to buy every single cold stone that Fespa has in stock. He also wants all of Fespa's healing potions as well, and Fespa is speechless because buying all those potions would cost an astronomical amount of money. Kyle agrees that it's a bit impractical because it would take ages to carry all the coins here. So instead, he just plops a bag of gems worth 10 million coins on the table and says they'll call it even. After that, Kyle and the others leave the store, but Theron is a little worried that rumors about them being rich might start spreading, and they wouldn't want the IRS knocking at their door. Kyle tells him he doesn't have to worry about that because they are leaving the capital tomorrow, but the others are surprised since they didn't know their stay here would be so short. This is the first time Lise or Theron have ever been to the capital, and they want to make the most of it. So Theron runs off to go live his big city dreams, and Urza tells Lise that she'll show her around town. Sylvie also tries to run off to try some more snacks, but Kyle stops her because there's something the two of them need to discuss while the others are gone. Kyle takes Sylvie back to the inn, and once they are inside, he asks her if she thinks the future can really be changed. But Sylvie thinks his question is dumb because the future was never set in stone to begin with. The way she sees it, the spell that brought Kyle back in time probably plucked his soul out of his current timeline and placed him at an earlier point in a different timeline, which is why the dragon heart that he used as a catalyst is in his possession, even though the dragon heart of this timeline is still out there somewhere. Kyle's very presence in this timeline is bound to cause changes, but at this rate, the Great Invasion is still bound to happen at some point, so they'll need to do something about that. Knowing that his actions can change the course of fate is good enough for Kyle, so he's willing to do whatever it takes to save the world, but there is still one thing he is curious about. There are currently 2 dragon hearts in this world because of the time travel, but if that's how it works, then Kyle wonders why there's only one of him here. Sylvie has a theory about this as well, so she tells Kyle about one of the most forbidden forms of magic out there, soul fusion. In this world, a person's max magic power is determined at birth, and no amount of training can change that, but back in the prime of Sildonia, they discover that the magic power of a person could be increased by fusing 2 souls together. Naturally, they performed experiments on infants with artificial souls, but it ended in a catastrophic failure, so soul fusion was categorized as forbidden magic. Regarding what happened to Kyle, Sylvie believes that the souls of the Kyle from the future and the Kyle from the past were fused together, and thankfully, since they were the exact same, it seems to have happened without any major complications. As a result, his magic power was practically doubled, so Kyle should be way stronger than he was in the previous timeline. He may even be able to use the highest form of magic, but whether he can master is another story entirely. This is an unprecedented case, so Sylvie has no idea what implications or side effects it may have on Kyle. With that said, she tells him she'll give him advice if anything comes up, so he had better tell her as soon as he feels anything off. Later that night, Lise and Urza return from their sightseeing, and Lise is ready to go to sleep, but Urza says she'll stay up for a little longer since she enjoys the sight of the full moon since it only happens once a month. Hang on, the only reason she's here is because she had to stay near Kyle until the full moon so she could perform the contract, but she completely forgot, and the night is almost over so she has to find Kyle quickly. Kyle was out in the forest training with Sylvie when Urza suddenly comes running up to him. She reminds him that tonight is a full moon, so they need to do the contract ritual now. Kyle had completely forgotten about that, and he's still willing to go through with the contract, but he has been training for hours already, and he was just about to go to sleep, so he asks her if they can just do it next month instead. Urza refuses because she can't just leave things as they are, so Kyle eventually agrees and Urza begins drawing the contract circle. While she was growing up, Urza always saw the contract of application as a sign of commitment between lovers, and she'd always see it done at the weddings in her village, so she had hoped she would get to experience it one day. But she never could have expected that it would happen like this. She eventually finishes drawing the circle, so she tells Kyle she's ready to begin. However, Kyle has been asleep for a while now. Urza yells at him to get up already because they need to get this done before the night ends, so Kyle wakes up and the two of them stand in the middle of the circle. Kyle recalls how he and Urza performed the ceremony back when they got married in the other timeline, so after he vows not to use Urza's true name for evil, he steps forward and kisses her. Urza is so stunned that she doesn't react initially, but when she finally processes what's happening, she pushes Kyle away and demands to know what he thinks he is doing. Kyle doesn't understand why she's so upset since this is just the final step of sealing the contract, but Urza tells him that there's only a kiss at the end when the contract is being done for a marriage, and this wasn't meant to be a marriage contract, so Urza is pissed. The next morning, Kyle and the others start leaving the capital. Lise notices that the others look awfully tired. Kyle says he and Urza were up late at night because of a little incident, but Urza doesn't want to talk about it. As for Theron, he was up all night trying to get a girlfriend, but even though he's rich now, he had no such luck. Anyway, the group is headed for Arkan now, but Kyle didn't want to explain why, so he just told everyone that Sylvie has a prophetic ability that said they should go there. Upon arriving in Arkan, the group just so happens to show up right when Princess Melina is having a town visit. Melina is a kind princess, beloved by all her people, so the others are excited to see her, but Kyle is the only one who knows that 2 days from now, Melina is fated to die. In 2 days, Melina's caravan will head to the village of Scenes. Along the way, she will be attacked by a Hydra and killed. Scenes was recently attacked by Hydras, so Melina's plan was to go there to show her support for the region, which ultimately led to her demise. Kyle thinks what happened is the natural result of her poor choices, since going to the village of Scenes while it's still dangerous, even out of kindness, was a dumb decision. Sylvie asks if it's possible that Melina was assassinated, and it was covered up to make it look like a monster attack, and Kyle admits that there were rumors that Melina's brother, Prince Karanes, was behind it, but no evidence was ever found regarding his involvement. It was ultimately deemed an unfortunate accident, and Kyle plans to use that unfortunate accident to his advantage, so he can become a hero. This was the end of episode 3. Subscribe to not miss the next part.